I never thought humiliation could shimmer so brightly under fairy lights. My name is Saphira Harlow. I'm 35, a mother, a legal clerk, and the family disappointment in pearls. I wasn't invited to the rehearsal dinner. My name was misspelled on the RSVP. And yet, I showed up to my sister's wedding in the one dress that still zipped all the way, holding my son Milo's hand like a lifeline. It's strange, the lies we tell ourselves just to show up. I told myself it would be different this time. That maybe, after all these years, the way they looked at me might change. That Celeste, my sister, the golden child in heels, might actually see me as someone worth more than a cautionary tale. But that day, standing among crystal chandeliers and curated perfection, I learned something no one ever tells you about family. Sometimes the ones who share your blood are the first to draw it. And yet, someone unexpected stood between me and the wreckage. This isn't a love story. It's not even a revenge story. It's a story about dignity, the kind you have to dig out from under years of silence, shame, and champagne flutes. And it started the moment I chose not to run. The wedding invitation arrived on a rainy Tuesday, slipped between a grocery store coupon and a utility bill. The envelope was cream-colored, embossed, and smelled faintly of expensive perfume. My name was spelled Saphira. Not even close. I stared at it for a full minute, unsure if I should laugh or cry. Milo, my son, was balancing on the couch arm with a half-eaten granola bar. "What's that?" he asked, chewing like a goat. "It's an invitation," I said carefully. "Aunt Celeste is getting married." His eyes lit up. "Do I get to wear a suit?" I didn't answer right away. There was a time when Celeste and I shared bunk beds, whispered secrets under covers, and pinky promised forever. That version of us was long gone, buried under years of comparison, cold shoulders, and my mother's selective amnesia. Celeste became everything I wasn't. Graceful, adored, invincible. I became the story they only mentioned in lowered voices, the cautionary footnote of what happens when you trust the wrong man and end up a single mom before 30. Still, Milo was excited. He didn't know the history. He hadn't seen how Darlene, my mother, looked right through me at every Thanksgiving, like I was part of the furniture. He didn't know the sting of being called selfish for choosing to raise him alone. That night, while he slept, I placed the invitation on my tiny kitchen table and stared at it like it might offer me an answer. I knew it wasn't really for me. It was a performance piece, a gesture, an obligation. I wasn't on the guest list because they wanted me there. I was on it because it would have looked bad if I weren't. But what if I went? Not for them, not even for closure, but for Milo. To let him see that sometimes we show up, even in the places that once broke us. 2 weeks later, I was standing in front of my foggy bathroom mirror, curling my hair with the same iron I'd had since college. My dress, a navy blue sheath from a secondhand boutique, fit better than I expected. Milo stood in his clip-on tie, beaming, like we were about to walk into a fairy tale. He looked up at me and said, "You look like a real lady today, Mom." My throat tightened. We arrived at the venue 15 minutes early. It was a grand estate outside the city, all marble archways and topiary hedges. The kind of place that cost more in flowers than I made in a month. As we walked in, I clutched Milo's hand tightly. He pointed at the chandelier in the foyer and whispered, "It looks like an upside-down spaceship." A staff member escorted us to our table, table 14 near the kitchen doors. I tried not to flinch. My cousin Ashley breezed by in a satin blush gown and didn't look twice at me. Darlene floated across the room in a tailored lavender ensemble, stopping to kiss cheeks and adjust napkins, her gaze skating over me like I was part of the decor. No hello, no smile. Celeste appeared minutes later, a vision in white lace and flawless teeth. She saw me, paused, tilted her head. "You made it," she said. "I did," I replied, offering a tight smile. She glanced down at Milo. "He's getting big." "He's 8, I said. "Wow," she replied. No hug, no warmth. Just air kisses and exit stage left. I sat down at our table. Milo busied himself stacking butter packets. I smoothed my skirt and told myself I could handle this. I'd handled worse. I'd handled childbirth alone, rent increases, Milo's broken arm, and the year we had to share one winter coat. I could handle a wedding, right? What I didn't know then was that the real ceremony hadn't started yet, that the performance wasn't in the vows or the veil, it was in the spotlight, and it would be turned on me when I least expected it. Dinner was plated with precision, steak medallions with a drizzle of something I couldn't pronounce, greens curled like they'd been arranged by tweezers. I barely touched mine. Milo was fascinated by the butter rosettes and kept asking if he could take one home. I told him we'd ask for a to-go box and pretended I wasn't sinking deeper into my chair with each passing minute. The room glowed under soft golden lighting. Guests mingled between courses, clinking glasses, taking selfies under cascading flower walls. Laughter floated like perfume in the air, light, artificial, practiced. I recognized faces I hadn't seen in years. Most offered nothing more than a nod. A few gave polite smiles, the kind that never reached their eyes. Everywhere I looked, Celeste sparkled. She moved through the space like she was born for it, slipping between groups with polished charm, never missing a beat. The guests loved her, but then again, they always had. She was the daughter who made Darlene proud. The walking, talking family brand. Me? I was seated next to the waiter station. "Mom, is that shrimp?" Milo asked, poking the appetizer. I nodded, then looked around again, scanning faces, waiting for someone, anyone, to acknowledge me beyond the obligatory nod. Darlene passed our table twice. Both times she looked past me like I was someone else's problem. And still, I stayed. I stayed because Milo's eyes lit up when he watched the string quartet. Because he whispered to me, "She looks like a princess," when Celeste walked by in her gown. I stayed because he deserved to see that his mother wasn't afraid of pretty places, even when they tried to make her feel ugly inside. Then came the speeches. It started innocently enough. One of Nate's groomsmen told a story about a college prank involving a raccoon and a bottle of cologne. People laughed. The ice broke. Celeste dabbed her eyes and kissed Nate's cheek. I thought maybe, just maybe, we were on the home stretch. Then Celeste stood. The lights seemed to adjust themselves as she rose, lifting her champagne flute with a freshly manicured hand. Her smile was radiant, rehearsed. Her voice slid across the room with confidence only years of praise could perfect. "I just want to thank everyone for being here," she said. "It means so much to have all the people we love most in one place." The crowd murmured approvingly. "We've all heard enough about how perfect Nate is," she added with a wink. Laughter. "And yes," she continued, "this day is about love, commitment, and family." My pulse ticked upward. Milo leaned forward, chin propped on his hands. "And speaking of family," she said, pausing dramatically, "there's someone I absolutely must acknowledge." I smiled despite myself. My big sister, Saphira. A few heads turned. I sat up a little straighter. Celeste beamed at me. "You've always been such an inspiration. Raising a kid on your own, that takes guts. Especially with no partner, no backup, and let's be honest, no real plan." The room chuckled. My face flushed. "But look at you," she said brightly. "Still showing up, still swinging." Another ripple of laughter, louder this time. Milo's brow furrowed. "And hey," Celeste added, "not everyone can turn a mistake into a personality." That one hit like a slap. The laughter was sharper now, more amused, more cruel. I felt it in my chest, a slow, grinding pressure. My hands clenched in my lap. I looked at Milo. His expression was confused, lips parted, brows scrunched. He didn't understand the joke, but he knew it wasn't kind. Then Darlene chimed in. From her table across the room, her voice carried with perfect clarity. "Well, she might be a used product, but she still scrubs up all right." A silence cracked through the laughter. Half the room chuckled nervously. The other half shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I couldn't move. I sat frozen, every nerve in my body locked in place. I wanted to speak, to stand, to scream. But all I could do was stare at the tablecloth and wonder how I'd become the entertainment. Milo tugged at my sleeve. "Why did they say that, Mom?" I couldn't answer. Because how do you explain to an 8-year-old that the people who are supposed to love you most can sometimes be the ones who hurt you deepest? I looked up again, desperate for a lifeline, for someone to stand, to interrupt, to say enough. But no one did. My grandfather stared at his plate. My cousin filmed the moment like it was a comedy roast. Even Uncle Ross, who used to call me kiddo and sneak me butterscotch candies at family dinners, wouldn't meet my eyes. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just a moment. It was a mirror. One that showed me exactly where I stood in this family. One that showed Milo, too. I don't remember standing. I only remember the feeling, like my skin was too tight and my lungs had shrunk in my chest. Milo looked up at me, eyes wide with worry, his small hand still wrapped around my wrist. I wasn't sure where we were going. Out of the ballroom, into the parking lot, to the farthest edge of anywhere. I just knew we had to get away from the spotlight that had suddenly turned into a heat lamp. But then, from the head table, a chair scraped. I stopped. Nathaniel, Nate, Celeste's groom, stood slowly. He didn't look at Celeste. He didn't glance toward Darlene. He looked straight at me. The room stilled. At first, I thought he was about to smooth it over. Maybe offer a polished joke, something like, siblings, right? Or, weddings bring out the emotions. That was how things worked in our family. Wrap cruelty in a bow, call it tradition, move on. But Nate didn't smile. He stepped forward, one hand wrapped around the microphone. I can't pretend I didn't hear that, he said, voice calm but clear. And I can't stay silent just because it would be easier. The guests froze. Forks hovered midair. Glasses stopped clinking. The silence was no longer awkward. It was electric. She didn't deserve that, Nate continued, eyes still locked on me. Saphira came here today to support her sister, not to be ridiculed in front of her child. Someone cleared their throat. A woman near the back whispered, "Is this really happening?" Celeste's mouth had tightened into a perfect, controlled smile, the kind that cracked if you looked too long. Darlene folded her arms across her chest. "What on earth are you doing?" she muttered. Nate ignored her. "You all laughed," he said. "Some of you awkwardly. Some of you with full bellies and full wine glasses. But you laughed while a little boy watched his mother get torn down like she wasn't human." He turned his gaze briefly to Milo, who was half hiding behind my dress, still clutching my hand. "She didn't ask for your applause," Nate said. "She didn't even ask for kindness. She just showed up, and that should have been enough." I couldn't breathe. I didn't know whether to cry or run or collapse. All I could do was stand there and absorb every word like it was stitching something back together inside me. Nate took another step toward our table. "Celeste," he said, not cruelly, but with measured distance. "You mocked your sister to earn a laugh. You turned pain into performance. I thought I knew who you were, but today, I saw someone I don't recognize." Celeste's hand tightened around her champagne flute. She opened her mouth to speak, but stopped. There was nothing she could say that wouldn't make it worse. "I don't want a life built on this kind of silence," Nate said, now addressing the entire room. "On cruelty dressed up as humor. On pretending someone's dignity doesn't matter because they're the family's black sheep." His voice wavered, just slightly, but he held firm. "I don't know what kind of husband I'll be," he continued, "but I know the kind of man I want to be. And it's not one who stands by and lets this happen." He gently set the microphone down on the head table, the soft clack ringing louder than any applause ever could. Then he looked at me one last time, not with pity, but with something I hadn't felt from anyone in years: respect. He turned and walked out. Just like that, the groom, gone. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was seismic. I felt dozens of eyes shift toward me, but for once, I didn't flinch. I didn't feel small or invisible. I felt seen. Celeste stood, shell-shocked. Darlene hissed something under her breath and followed Nate, heels clicking like a slow drumbeat of denial. But the room had already changed. Milo looked up at me, whispering, "Did that really just happen?" I nodded. "Yeah, baby, it did." We stayed only long enough to grab our coats. I didn't say goodbye. No one stopped me. Some guests avoided eye contact. Others looked like they might speak but thought better of it. Halfway to the door, a voice called my name. "Saphira!" It was Grandpa Edward. He'd risen from his chair, a little unsteady but determined. "I should have spoken up years ago," he said quietly, eyes damp. "I'm sorry I didn't." I couldn't speak. I just nodded. And then we walked out, not defeated, not disgraced, but whole. Outside, the air was cooler than I expected. Milo and I stood near the front entrance, the fading sun casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. He held my hand tightly, his silence heavier than any question he could have asked. I wanted to go. Every cell in my body screamed to get in the car and drive until the estate was just a blur in the rearview mirror. But I hadn't taken 2 steps when the sound of a chair scraping across tile stopped me cold. Nathaniel stood. He didn't look at Celeste or Darlene. He looked directly at me. And then he spoke. "I won't let that pass," he said, voice low but steady. "I won't pretend that was okay." The chatter died instantly. Guests froze mid-bite, some with forks halfway to their mouths. "She didn't deserve that," he continued. "Not her, not her son. That wasn't a joke, that was cruelty." He wasn't angry. He was disappointed, profoundly so, and somehow that made it louder than shouting. "You mocked your sister to get a laugh," he said to Celeste. "In front of a child, your nephew." Celeste paled. Darlene's eyes flashed, but she said nothing. "I don't want to marry into that kind of silence," he finished. Then he set the mic down, turned, and walked out. Just like that. He left the wedding, and suddenly, everything else, judgment, shame, years of being ignored, felt like dust. No one followed us as we left. No one stopped us. But for the first time, they watched me go. Not as an afterthought, but as someone who stood tall. Milo squeezed my hand. "Are we still going home?" "Yes," I said, meeting his eyes. "And we're taking the long way." We didn't speak much on the drive home. The road stretched out quiet and long, the city lights flickering in the distance like fireflies. Milo leaned his head against the window, still dressed in his little suit, his clip-on tie slightly crooked. I reached over and fixed it with one hand, while steering with the other. He didn't say anything, just looked at me with a softness that held more understanding than any child should have to carry. At home, I tucked him into bed, kissed his forehead, and lingered by his door longer than usual. I didn't want to cry, and I didn't want to smile. I just wanted the stillness to last a little longer. The next morning, my phone was overflowing. Texts, missed calls, and a video. Nate's speech. It had gone viral overnight. Thousands of shares, tens of thousands of comments. People I didn't know were calling him brave, calling me brave, calling out the cruelty for what it was. I didn't feel like a hero. I wasn't even sure I felt healed. But I did feel lighter. Darlene called once. Not to apologize, just to say I should have laughed it off. "It was a joke, Saphira," she said coldly. "You made it worse." I said nothing. I didn't owe her defense or forgiveness. I simply replied, "I'm not your punching bag anymore." Then I hung up. That was the last time we spoke. Celeste never reached out. Her wedding photos disappeared from her social media, quietly erased like the night had never happened. Nate vanished from her feed too. The engagement was off. No announcement, just silence. A week later, a small bouquet arrived at my office. Wildflowers, messy and beautiful. No note, only a card with 5 words. "To the lioness, stay standing." I didn't need to guess who sent it. Life didn't magically fix itself. I still juggled bills and overtime. Still made dinner while helping Milo with his math homework. But something fundamental had shifted. I stopped sitting in the back. I stopped apologizing with my posture. I stopped shrinking to make other people feel more comfortable. And Milo? He watched everything. Not just the moment I stood up, but the moment I didn't crumble. He started asking different questions. About kindness, courage, silence. About how one voice can break a room open. One night, brushing his teeth beside me, he looked up and said, "Mom, I think you won." I smiled at him through the mirror. "Yeah, baby, I think I did."